What it shall be. This is video 45. Today we're talking about the quintessence, also known as the fifth element. So this is some pretty deep shit that we're trying to get to. And the theory is that behind all the material elements that we can see with our eyes and touch and taste, there's an inscrutable, invisible, animating force that lies behind it all. And there's so much to say about that. Think about the number 5, okay? There's all kinds of things that could come into that. Like we have five fingers, right? 5 toes. I guess if you count, I mean, there's a lot of things that come in 5s. Interestingly, okay, here's an interesting correlation with the number 5 and the quintessence, which I think is really important, and it dovetails super well with what I've already made. So, the apple tree or the pear tree in the Garden of Eden. Interestingly, a lot of people don't know this. Like, myths around the world associate Eden with apples, okay? Like in the Greeks, they have the golden fleece and the garden of the Hesperides, right? Which is golden apples, right? Then there's that story where the judgment of Paris, where he has to pick the most beautiful goddess. And Eris, the goddess of discord, drops a golden apple, which starts this big brawl between all the goddesses to see who's number 1. But apples, okay. Apples and Venus, she ends up winning, I'm pretty sure. Apples, Venus. Okay, now if you slice an apple crossways, you'll see there's 5 seeds in the middle, and it's got a pentagonal symmetry. And in fact, the apple tree is a member of the rose family, Rosacea. And so there's a lot of deep symbolism with that. Rose is the symbol of Venus as well. And Venus, in fact, the planet itself, has a cyclic orbit that goes retrograde in such a pattern that it forms a near perfect pentagram if you were to trace it relative to the positions of the sun and the earth. So that's another 5, right? You ever seen this movie Fifth Element? Okay, that movie spells it out so fucking clear. It's like indisputable, right? So the 5th element at the very end, right? They're trying to get her to like actualize her power and so forth. She's wearing orange too, which is full Kabbalah, you know? But anyway, so they have this statue, right? And it's looking directly up, and it has an open mouth. Okay, and when they do this thing with the little pillars, and the 4 elements get activated, and then she like arcs back and points her throat up, you know, and then gets energized with this electricity type phenomenon from space. Okay, they're spelling it all out for you right there. But anyway, so, and again, this goes to the 4 rivers of Eden and the 5th element that I was mentioning in the previous video. So, in essence, this 5th element is actually the goal of all alchemy and transmutation of metals and everything. And then there's a couple different symbols for it. And, you know, alchemy has symbols for all these different substances. And one of them is like a 4, like if you imagine that numeral 4, and then off the bar, the horizontal bar that comes off, there's a little dip like that. It's kind of like an upside down omega. So, I mean, I could go, in a way, that symbol is a combination and a 4 and a 5, which is interesting because this is video 45. But anyway, the quintessence, it's basically equivalent to Akash, or what I was saying. And all things, every object and even ideas partake of this quintessence, which is an intangible substrate that underlies all matter. So how does that relate to our lives, right? Oh, interesting, here's another correlation. If you go up the chakras, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the throat. Okay, so in Tantra, the Buddhist Tantra that I follow, they have 5 kleshas, which are emotional afflictions that can cloud the consciousness. And there's 5 main chakras in the Tibetan system. So that's another correlation. And then yesterday I was talking about the 4 rivers of Eden and the central pillar of the tree or the tower. You know, it's exact same in Buddhist Tantra, Tibetan Buddhist Tantra. So yesterday I was reading about this Kabbalah treatise on the Garden of Eden and the 4 rivers, and they were talking about how they would use in a ritual fashion these stones. So they would have five rough stones and 5 smooth stones. And when I read that, it blew me away. I was like, whoa, okay, because I do a Tibetan tantric sadhana every single day, and it has that exact, not stones, but I mean in certain contexts they do use these stones for different symbolism. But basically, so what you do is you visualize, so there's these kleshas that you have, which is emotional afflictions like ignorance, fear, aggression, lust, and so on, different things like that. But it's emotional loops that get the mind stuck and prevent clarity, because you're kind of gripping and fixating onto something too much, and you're just looping around. Like, you're not solving the problem really, you're just like perpetuating a repetitive thought pattern. And so it prevents this clarity because there's too much attachment, right? Like, you have such a strong preference for one outcome or another that you're not really seeing the issue in a holistic way. But the point is, in this tantric sadhana, every single day you're visualizing the transformation of these kleshas from a corrupted form into a pure form. Because in the tantric system, behind every affliction of the mind is also a purity, a pure aspect of the consciousness that's sacred and pure and gives you wisdom, right? So, but you have to transmute the bad into the good. You have to transmute ignorance into wisdom, right? So, like, I'm in the Enigma, so we are all about the red color and the fire element, right? And that represents the klesha of attachment and desire, right? So what you do is you try to transmute that into its flip side, which is what's called discriminating awareness, right? So when you desire something, essentially you're choosing it and you're singling it out from other things, right? And so, like, for me, okay, I'll use a silly example, but this is super symbolic, okay? I like to have apples, dude. I love apples. Apple a day, it keeps the doctor away, right? I love apples so much. They're just delicious to me. And when you get a really good one, it's got such a complex flavor and you're like, wow. So anyway, when I go to get apples, like, I gotta get one every day. I don't like stock up usually. Sometimes I have to, but basically you go in, or I go in, and I select it super carefully and I look at it to make sure there's no bugs in it and worms and stuff, or mold. Sometimes they mold. If the surface gets pierced in any way, like corruption can get in there. So you have to look and select them very carefully. And I've got to a point where I can tell by the shape, like, which ones are super delicious. So that's what I'm saying about discriminating awareness. It's like you're using your faculties of the mind to choose and select what you find most appealing and best, right? So this is a very valuable thing in the Buddhist practice, right? But if you're attached to your desires in this, like, delusional way, and you refuse to let it go, or you refuse, in fact, to see any negative consequences or negative aspects of the things that you're chasing after, then it basically leads to death, to be honest. And because humans, like I said, they have these kleshas or thought loops. And so once they grip something, they can't really let it go. And they can't really see both sides of it. They just want to see the pretty, sexy, seductive side to it, right? So, but if you transmute that and you have discriminating awareness, then it allows you to understand cause and effect in a really great way. Like, one of the main kind of motifs that comes up in the Buddhist teaching is like what to adopt and what to avoid, right? So you see, whatever say the goal that you're trying to reach is enlightenment, right? So there's certain actions and certain characteristics of things that will contribute to that effect, certain causes that lead you to that effect. So that's what you want to adopt, and you want to avoid things that distract your energy away. And have, you know, there's negative things that will actually block or obscure or prevent this enlightenment process from working. But then there's also just neutral things that aren't really harmful. They don't particularly prevent or counteract or negate this enlightenment process, but they don't either benefit it or destroy it. They just kind of distract. You know, it's like taking energy to something that has no positive or negative benefit, but it's still consuming your thought, your perceptions, your focus, and so on. So this is where discriminating awareness becomes valuable, is because you want to be able to distinguish the difference between things, whether they're of benefit and you know, sort of reinforcing this enlightenment process, or whether they are distracting, or whether they're neutral, right? So each one of those is a form of discriminating awareness, right? So now what does this have to do with the quintessence, right? So think about the allegory of the Garden of Eden. It's all about desire. And at some point, I will have to go into what that's really all about. The fruit, right? The fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And of course, as I keep trying to say, all the religions of the world ultimately are a sex cult. Because what is religion about? It's about usually the creation process of how things come to be, whether it's in the Christian context of like the creator God, or whether it's in the Buddhist context of cause and effect. They're always trying to go back to this primordial state that of purity and a balance, right? That's the important thing, is bringing these four elements, these four rivers of Eden, to a point of balance. Because if you have too much desire, or too much, you know, greed, or too much of whatever, it takes you off center, and whatever you create in that state is going to be imbalanced, and it's going to be unstable. You know, just like a table where the legs are not of equal length. See what I mean? So it's all about integrating that balance, and really this fifth element is like the pivot point of all the others, because in essence it contains all the others in potential within itself, and you can see how they spread out from that central point. So basically, the synthesis of the quintessence is what gives total wisdom, and also transcends time, you know, and it transcends space as well. So that's what Eden is, in a sense. It's all in that apple. It's all in that fruit. And so if you want to go really deep, like, what is the knowledge of good and evil, right? Good and evil is in essence like a perspective that we assume according to our time and place and our likes and dislikes. But in essence, I mean, this is a very Tantra concept, is that ultimately, when you spread out enough, like expand your consciousness enough, you see there's a way for evil to serve the cause of good, and that it's all part of a whole. You can't ultimately really separate good and evil, you know, and they play on each other, they define each other, you know, and really, like, ultimately it's a point of view of perspective, you know, like take just a really simple example, like lifting weights or something. Like, you go to lift weights, ow, it hurts, you know, like, it hurts. But your body takes that pain and tension and that piezoelectric current that builds up in your bones and muscles, and it sets the program to, okay, we have to become stronger, because here's a task that we're performing that has broken us down. So we have to become stronger. Even the bones become stronger and thicker, and they grow, and the muscle fibers grow and regenerate from this strengthening process. So there, out of pain comes a positive result. Out of strife comes growth. So in essence, there's a pivot point of all time and space, and there's a pivot point of all the material elements, and that's what gives wholeness.